The Soybean School on realagriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans, and High Stick NT.
Here from realagriculture.com, coming to you today from Stratford, Ontario, joined by Horst Bonner, soybean specialist for the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, good stuff. We're going to spend some time talking about soybeans of all things.
Excellent,
today.
my favorite topic. Yeah.
All things. Let's talk about this season. A real tough one, but I guess the bottom line is I'm hearing about 47 bushels to the acre. That's a pretty impressive number.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really was a fascinating year again, right? We started off, and for a lot of us it was wet, and then for other places it was actually too dry after it was wet, and so we couldn't always get the seed into moisture. So we had some poor plant stands around the countryside, especially over in Huron County. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, though, it's just fascinating how things turn out sometimes, isn't it? We were worried about those crops for so long early in the season, you know, thin parts of the field, and then with the way we had such moisture, the beans came on, they filled in, and it was actually in a lot of cases better to have a lower plant stand because they didn't flop over and lodge. And a lot of the really thick stands that looked so incredible early on, they looked so nice early on, they ended up lodging, and this was one of the worst lodging years I've ever seen in my career. Mm-hmm. And as you know, lodging is bad news. Once you have lodging, you have more disease, and we had one of the worst white mold years that we've ever had in soybeans.
Let's talk about white mold. And, you know, it was a big part of the conversation this summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do we see from a yield impact? I know it sort of ranges across the province, but you know, was this one of the worst white mold years you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in the last 10 years, this was one of the worst white mold years we've seen. So it's like so many things in life, it's a question of degrees. If you have a little bit, it's probably not a bad thing. And you know, we used to say that a little bit of white mold is the sign of a good crop because, of course, it means that you've had moisture. And the old saying, rain makes grain, especially for soybeans in July and August. And so a little bit of white mold, which a lot of us had, you know, little pockets or, you know, 2% of the field, not a big deal. The rest of the field, the other plants can compensate. Mm-hmm. And like I said, sometimes it's actually the sign of a good crop. The problem is when you have a lot of white mold, that little bit goes to a lot, goes to a disaster, right? And we did have those fields, sadly, especially in eastern Ontario too, where we had fields that were as low as 15 bushels at the end of the day because of white mold. So white mold is one of those things that we have to have on our radar screen. No question, we have to think about white mold management because most of what we can do to control white mold is done before planting, right?
Interesting thing. We've heard a lot of chatter about growers, and this is such a late harvest, and you know, obviously corn's still out there. There's still some soybeans out there, and people are wondering hey, can I go through the winter with this stuff? You say no. You say go out and get it.
Well, you're absolutely right. So the fundamental problem with soybeans is they are a pretty wimpy plant, and as they start to dry down, if you get a lot of snow on them, they start to fall. And we left some out last winter just to see how they would overwinter, and certainly it happens every year that a few fields don't get combined. And it's not even just the fact that they fall down. All that moisture being continually exposed to moisture, what happens is the seed quality really starts to decline. You get alternaria in there. If you have any phomopsis or anything, the seed just starts to shrivel and deteriorate. Mm-hmm. And then if you go in there in the spring and try and combine, there's nothing left, right? Mm-hmm. So I think most soybean growers know this intuitively. You got to get her done. Mm-hmm. And even if it's, you know, dare I say it, 25% seed moisture, if they'll go through the combine and you got a window, you got to get her done.
So that wraps up 2014. We're going to come back in a few minutes and do another part and look at 2015, what you've learned this year, and some recommendations for growers for another year to come.
Excellent, very good.